Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. We are continuing on with answering questions from you asked for it from a biblical perspective. This is a Bible question, and so here is the question that came in. Again, thank you so much for the person who submitted this question. They said in John chapter 8, regarding the adulterous woman, what was Jesus writing in the dust with his finger? That's a great question. Well, let's dive into John chapter 8, where that's found in the Bible, and let's see what it has to say. So let's start with John chapter 8, and starting in verse 4. This is where Jesus, he was speaking to the crowd, and the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they come to Jesus with this woman who was caught in adultery. And so that was a blatant sin. And so they bring Jesus this woman and ask what we should do with her. Okay, so starting in verse 4 of John chapter 8 says this: "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" And then in verse 6 it says, "They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger." So that's the question here is, what did he write with his finger? Well, let's continue on and let's just see if it gives us the answer. In verse 7, it says, "They kept demanding an answer." Again, these are the Pharisees. These are people that were constantly questioning Jesus, constantly trying to trick him, trying to accuse him because they didn't want him around. Because of their pride and jealousy. And so they kept demanding an answer from Jesus. So he stood up again, and this is what he said. He said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. Verse 9, "When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left with the middle of the crowd with the woman." Okay, so what did Jesus write with his finger in the dust? Well, it doesn't actually say in the Bible. So we have to kind of interpolate a little bit here. We have to look at context, and we have to look at what happened here before. We have to understand what was the goal of the Pharisees and what was Jesus and what was his goal and what was his desire, and what did he do, and out of the outcome, what happened with the accusers. Okay, so looking at all of those things, I look at it from this perspective. Again, we don't fully know, so I'm just gonna say Jesus could have wrote these types of things in the sand. He could have wrote pride. He could have wrote greed. He could have wrote jealousy or gluttony or some other sins that her accusers were dealing with. Now, again, we don't fully know, but it does make sense that if he were to do that, and then for them to see what he wrote in the sand, and then when he stood up and said, "Hey, if any of you without sin, okay, you can cast the first stone." And obviously, no one is sinless. And so for them to realize that, they're like, "Oh, okay, we need to slip away here." And so it makes sense if, again, it could have happened where Jesus did write other sins that they were potentially dealing with or struggle with, to get them to understand here that we are saved by grace here. We can't earn it by doing good, by obtaining the law. Jesus said, "I have not come to abolish the law. The law is a good thing, but I have come to fulfill the law." And so I'm sorry for not completely answering your question because we don't fully know, but that is my interpretation of John chapter 8, where Jesus was with the adulterous woman and he is writing in the sand in the face of her accusers. So hopefully that brings some clarity, or at least something to ponder, to think about. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you tune in again tomorrow for the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth.